Hi, this is Ask GMBN Tech. Got any questions about mountain bike tech? Ask away in those comments underneath. Use that hashtag Ask GMBN Tech and we'll help you out on next week's show. Okay, so first up is from the gobs. So, why measure seat tube angle when measuring how far behind the BB your hips are when seated? Would it be a better determination of what is right for you? Okay, so there's a few questions here. Why are seat tubes so long on small frames? Clearly not designed by a short person who wants to drop a post. Also, why are BBs not all 83mm minimum for stability, if nothing else? And why are bike companies obsessed with short chainstays? Okay, so first one, seat angle. Yeah, I guess is quite a good point. Ultimately, the steeper the seat angle is on a bike, regardless of where your position is, as in your pedaling position, it puts your weight in a better position for climbing a bike off-road. Now, we've heard people talk about road bikes and how they don't have them. It's because of the fact that they put them in optimum position for getting the most out of the leverage of your legs for a long amount of time in that fixed position. We don't have that in off-road. Well, you do in cross-country, and that's why I have slacker seat tube angles. But it's a very good point though, and actually Nukeproof are referring to what they call saddle offset. So you can figure out where you need to be sat on the bike, and you can check the saddle offset on the bike manufacturer's website, which will be, you'll start seeing this being referred to more. It's a really smart way of actually seeing where you can actually sit on the bike, so that's kind of cool. Seat tube length, yeah, it's changing. Like bit by bit. Of course, there are some brands out there, seat tube length is too tall comparatively for the size of the bike, but at last you're now buying bikes by the length, which you should be, not the height, which was the old way of doing it in purely in seat tube length. Chainline is the answer to your next one. So 82mm, that's like downhill bottom bracket, yeah? So on a downhill bike, it's all about the stance on the bike, how wide you are, how stable you are. You haven't got to sit down and pedal that for a long time. If you were, forgetting the fact that you've got tiny little cranks on that bike and it's not designed for pedaling, you're going to get sore knees and probably sore hips as well, because, well, unless you're like John Wayne or you've got dodgy legs or something, you know, a bit bow leg, it's not going to be good for you. Yeah, you want to have quite a narrow stance so you're not straining anything. Think of where your legs are when you just stand up straight, yeah? If you start moving your feet further and further apart, you're going to strain your knees. So really, the bottom bracket width on a bike has been designed basically around that, and then add into the equation your chain line and things. If you were to have that, you're gonna have to have the chambering mounted inboard to match up with the back, unless you had a crazy wide back end as well. So you see on downhill bikes, I've got 157s, which I know is happening on trail bikes, but we're not running 82mm bottom bracket shells, so there's a lot of stuff going on there really. And why do we need another standard anyway? Standards, God, they do my head in. I'm sure they do a lot of other people's. And chainstays, well, yeah, I think the same. Chainstays should be, you know, the bike shouldn't be, it's got a short chainstay. It should be proportional to the length of the front end of the bike and to the size of the bike. I don't need short chainstays because my bikes are generally really big. I need a chainstay that fits the size of the bike. You might need a chainstay that's really short because your bike is small. Yeah, okay, so I do think there is room within that statement though. You know, a longer chainstay option is good for certain types of handling, and a shorter chainstay is a bit more playful, but within reason. It shouldn't be just sold as a short chainstay bike or a long chainstay bike. I think they should be proportional for actually what they're designed for and who they're designed for. Next one is from Horsejaw. Now, it sounds like you must be a friend of mine, because my mates used to call me Horsehead because I've got quite a skinny head and it's quite like long. So Horsejaw. Yeah, so I'm guessing you're quite jawry in your facial area. I don't really understand what a crank upgrade would help with on a bike besides a little weight. I've got an NX crank on my fat bike. Would it be worth the money to upgrade to GX aluminium or even the carbon? I have a GX derailleur and shifter. No, okay, don't bother changing it unless it's broken. Okay, so the reasons for changing your crank on your bike, yeah, it's broken or bent. Yeah, so in which case replace it, and you might want to save a bit of weight when you replace that one, but also sometimes you need a stiffer crank. So in cross country, for example, you tend to have much lighter weight components on a bike. This is great because they're super light, but they don't always suit heavy riders. I don't like to use super lightweight things like cranks because they tend to not be as stiff when you're heavy, yeah? So it's all proportional to what you're doing with them as well. And of course the chainring interface itself. Some cranks are direct mount, some cranks have spiders on them for the chainring. You might want to change that setup. So really a crank is one of the last things you would change on your bike. You change it when it's absolutely knackered. Basically, there's no reason to change it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Next question. So in fact, there's three here, kind of Lefty related. First one's from Fritz Stahl saying, are Lefty forks an option for a cross-country racer? This one is, yeah, 100%. This is the Lefty Ocho. It's a single crown fork. It has 100mm of travel. It is very light. It's one of the lighter forks on the market. It's exceptionally stiff, which is what it offers like this. Now, the Lefty has always been looked at as an obscure fork, and people think, oh, it can't possibly be strong in that. Well, you'd be wrong. They're immensely strong and immensely stiff, and actually, in certain elements, they're stiffer than a regular telescopic fork. And you might be thinking, why doesn't everyone use these? Because they're expensive, and they're very expensive to make. Now, if you think inside this leg, you've got the air spring, but you've also got the compression damping and the rebound damping all inside here. That's a very hard thing to engineer. Whereas on a modern regular mountain bike fork, you've got one air leg or your spring leg, and your other leg is your damping leg. So it's all spread out a bit, a lot easier to manufacture. The tolerances perhaps might not be as tight on stuff like that compared to something like this. On the inside of this, the thing that makes this so stiff, this one has a three-sided, like a triangular profile leg, and it has needle bearings on each of those profiles. It can't go anywhere, basically. It's completely stiff, and it has like the slickest action you'd imagine. There's no stiction at all. Now, because it's so well supported by all of those needle bearings, whereas another fork, like a regular fork, has bushings on them, the bushings have to have an element of space between them for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if it was to contact completely the whole way down, you'd have immense friction and stiction. You probably wouldn't move. Also, it needs to have a little bit of space for the sort of the capillary action of allowing a bit of oil to move in between them. You don't need that with the bearings. The bearings need to touch the surface to support it, whereas the bushings will always have a slight amount of play. And that is actually the downfall of a bushing style fork when the fork is quite light. So on a cross-country fork, for example, let's just say you're 90 kilos and you're running a 100mm Fox 32 step cast. That is an ultralight fork, and it actually has like a weight limit for the rider. If you're a heavy rider and you're riding into a bumpy turn and the fork's under compression, what tends to happen is the fork actually twists slightly. We're talking like a very, very small amount here. This isn't like pointing fingers at any manufacturer, this is just part of flex. But one of the things that happens when that fork flexes is you get binding. Yeah, so you might notice if you have this issue on your bike, or if you're one of these type of riders, that the fork feels really firm under compression, and it's because the fork's flexing that the bushing is not allowing the fork to sort of telescope, as you like. It's not allowing it to actually move. You do not get that with this fork. And yes, arguably this is an extremely expensive and a very long way around the problem, but it's also probably one of the most iconic bits of design. I absolutely love what the Lefty stands for. I don't even use the things, and I absolutely love them. I think it's a bonkers bit of design, and I would be happy to use one tomorrow. I think they're super, super cool. And yeah, so they're very appropriate for cross-country races. They're just very expensive. Oh, there is also one other extra cool thing. In a race situation, for example, if you had a puncture on your front wheel or problem with the front wheel, you don't need to remove the wheel. You can access it because there isn't half a fork in the way. So you can actually change a tyre, whatever you need to, without removing it from the bike. Arguably, that could be slightly quicker in a race situation. The next question is from XBen White X. I'm intrigued about the fork in the third picture. Oh, so this is in relation to the Instagram post I did recently asking you lot for some questions. So the fork is this one. It's a USE sub fork. So USE is Ultimate Sports Engineering. You might know them today as Exposure. So they make the amazing lights, but they used to make a lot of bike components. Now this fork, like the Lefty, it's a single leg fork, but it has a regular profile to it and it has a linkage at the bottom to avoid it twisting. So it was an incredibly good fork, very stiff. But the cool thing about this linkage, made it anti-dive. Yeah, so this is an anti-dive left leg fork. Absolutely bonkers technology, but cost a hell of a lot of money to produce. And for such a small brand, they didn't have the sort of the power behind them that Cannondale did. So arguably, if the brand put a bit more money into it, you might see more of those today. I've never ridden one. I have felt the one that's in this picture. It felt great. It had an Arlo England cartridge unit on the inside. Wasn't anything you could tune as such, but the cartridges were very reliable. So arguably that could still be around today. And I think it was good sub 5 or something, because it was like mega lightweight, like sub 5 pound fork. Back then that was extremely light. Very cool. And the next question was from Connor Hill MTB. What's the benefit of a Lefty fork? Well, I think I pretty much summed that up. The fact that you're removing weight from the front of the bike, you're increasing rigidity, you're not getting any binding under compression. It does a lot of very cool things, but it is a very expensive item. That said, it's designed for top level racing, so top level racers want that kind of thing. Next question, why haven't belt-driven systems been established yet? Well, they kind of have, they just haven't got mainstream. So you need a gearbox really to run a belt drive system, and there's only a few gearbox systems on the market. They're actually quite good. There's Pinion, there's FE Gear, and there's a few others. Now Gates make belt drive systems, and actually I'd quite like to build a bike with a gearbox and a belt drive to ride myself. I have ridden them, and although the numbers say that the friction isn't much different to running a regular drivetrain, the fact is there is still a little bit more friction that you can notice on the bike, and given what you're turning around all day long, any small amount of friction in the long term, you could notice it. That said, you could probably adapt to it quite well. And the reason basically you won't have seen this is because manufacturers all need to adopt to the gearbox way of thinking for a belt drive to be beneficial, because you couldn't run one through derailleurs with those sort of gears, it just wouldn't work mechanically. But they're very cool, like they're really cool. I need to do more with gearbox stuff, I think. Like it's something I think we all want to use on a bike for how well they'll work, and binning off the derailleur and all that sort of stuff. It's just an incredibly intricate and hard thing to perfect, but it's coming. It's definitely coming soon. Next question is from James Wadgod. Is quick release dead? My frame has quick release dropouts, and I don't know whether to upgrade or to buy a new bike. Okay, well, quick releases are associated with slightly older tech, 135mm rear hubs. I think you probably could have got some 142s, but I forget, to be honest. And older front hub standards were up to boost now, which is 110, olds were 100. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, and there's loads of spare parts, so yes, you could still continue to upgrade your stuff, but it will have a limited life. So I guess the answer comes in, how long are you planning to keep and ride that bike for? If you're planning on keeping it forever, then yes, that's kind of alright, but at some point you're going to start running into problems getting spares. If it's just for a few years, no problem. But actually, it might save you money in the long run for the money that you're upgrading to put that towards a new bike with more modernised standards. Look for boost on the front end, look for 15mm, it's common. Look for boost on the rear end. I wouldn't be too concerned about super boost, because I honestly can't see it going mass market. You will see it on some bikes, but boost really. That said, don't quote me on it, because there's new standards all the time. But get the most modern bike you can, basically, if you're going to spend that money, and that way you kind of at least try and future-proof yourself against, you know, stuff at least in the next 10 years, you would hope. The standards do change all the time, and I do feel immensely sorry for anyone with old standards on a bike that you can't upgrade your components. Very difficult situation to be in. Next one's from Dalian Nelson. How do you fix a bent rotor? Actually, I'm not even going to show you that now, because I made a video exactly on that recently, and there's some grabs of me on screen fixing a bent rotor, and I'm going to put the link to that video in the description underneath. Now, the only thing to say with this, I was using a Park tool specially designed for this. You don't actually need it. Yeah, it does make it easier, but you can use an adjustable wrench to do it. Just make sure, if you do use an adjustable wrench to degrease the edges of the wrench, or use disc brake cleaner, make sure it can't, if you've got grease on it, it can't contaminate that disc rotor. That's the key to it. And if you're handling your disc rotor when you're doing it, wear a pair of rubber gloves or nitrile gloves, latex, something like that. Basically, you just don't want to contaminate the braking surface. But it's actually surprisingly easy to do it. It's hard if it's a very bent disc, but it's possible to true it and pass it through your rotor, pass it through the caliper without too many problems. Good luck with that. Next is from Stanislaw, who says, would a cross-country full sus frame be more resistant to breaking into pieces after a landing when compared to a new school trail hardtail? Well, probably not. New school trail hardtails, in fact there's some video clips of Neil on his on a very muddy ride. They're built to be super tough. They're very strong. Cross-country bikes are not built to be strong. They're built to be efficient and very light. And as such, they're often categorized basically to get around, well, not get around, to suggest like this is what they're used for. If you go jumping them, it's probably going to break, so don't come crying to us. Now I'm going to use my Canyon Lux as an example, because it's got a sticker I can see on the down tube. It says number 3 on it. So on screen, you should see that number 3. And they class this bike in category 3. They go from 1 to 5. And it says, bikes in this category are designed for harsher unpaved terrain. The scope for them includes occasional jumps up to a maximum height of 60 centimetres. Jumps of this scale can cause inexperienced riders to have accidents on landing, which can result in injury. Blah, 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 blah. And then the hardtail that Neil was riding, the Stoic, I think it is called, is in category 4. So the next one up, and it says, This category includes use on harsh obstacle scatter terrain with steep gradients and higher speeds. Regular moderate jumps pose no problem for experienced riders on these bikes, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of small print, but essentially, no. A cross-country bike can be jumped successfully by a very experienced rider, but not necessarily a heavy rider. I wouldn't fancy, I mean, when I'm super fit, I'm around 95 kilos. I'm actually a bit skinny at the moment. I've lost a bit of weight. I'm about 92 kilos. And I'm happy to jump my bike, but I wouldn't put it for anything hard. And if it did break from that, I wouldn't be surprised, because that is not what it's intended for. It's a super lightweight bike to be efficient. So if you go jumping a cross-country bike and it breaks, you've only got yourself to blame, really, in truth. If you want to go out and jump a bike, you need something with a bit more suspension, it's a bit more aggressive, or you need something like a trail hardtail, as you point out, which are super strong. Although you might smash up rear wheels a bit more on a hardtail. I'm going to put a link to the page on Canyon website with the categories basically underneath, so you can have a little read of that. They should be flashing up on screen anyway, so you can always freeze frame that. It is good to look at this stuff. All bike manufacturers will have something very similar on their website. I just said that one because I've literally got a bike there with it on. So definitely do a bit of reading if you're unsure, because, well, if in doubt, just riding along, you break your bike, you might be stuck with no warranty. So do take care on that front. Okay, next question is all about XD cassettes. So the XD driver body is a bit different to the regular one. So it's got slots and it's got threads on there. And the question says, when you're screwing down an XD cassette and it's just resting on the splines, how easy is it to get the alignment slightly off and completely ruin your free hub? To be honest, I've never had that problem, but I'd imagine if you put it on dry, you could arguably get in that problem not lining the threads up. My advice would be take your time with it and put a small amount of grease on it. It doesn't need loads lathered on there, just a small amount to make sure those splines, they're very short, just to slide in place and locate on the threads. And don't overdo it, don't rush. Like they do 99% of the time, just go on cleanly, but every now and then a little jiggle to make sure it goes on and then tighten up. But they do find their way on really well. It's a great system that SRAM developed with the XD body. Okay, next question is from Kyle Rand. Not sure exactly what it's called, but what's the deal with the extra gear above the chainring on some bikes? What's the advantages and disadvantages to having them? Right, so what you're referring to is known as an idler wheel. Okay, so you get these on high pivot suspension bikes. There's a Norco on screen with one, and a common style as well. Let's throw up a Forbidden. There you go. So there's 3 different style bikes all using that system, and I'm just going to throw up a shot of my Nuke Proof, which doesn't have that system. Okay. Right, so suspension on all mountain bikes is a compromise, okay, because you've got to pedal the thing along, right? So the chain makes it a compromise because you have to pedal this thing, but then the action can be compromised as well because of the fact you have to pedal it. So all suspension designers are striving to offer the best of both worlds, okay? So you need things like anti-squat and squat built into suspension, because if you have a bike that doesn't have those things, it's going to bounce up and down, okay? So you put anti-squat in it to resist what happens with the pedaling. But all of these things are affected by the length of the chain, which can grow with the way the rear axle moves under suspension. So it's generally seen as the best practice to have a lower pivot at the front because you have less effect of the chain on that rear suspension. But by having a high pivot, the rear wheel axle moves away and in a slight arcing position depending on the configuration of the suspension. The big advantage of this as far as suspension goes is when you're hitting bigger square objects, the wheel can actually move around them slightly, so the bike doesn't slow down as much or get like a stalling feeling. If you can imagine that, it almost feels like the bike hooks up sometimes with certain bike designs, but high pivot you don't get that. It feels like the bike just monster trucks through it. However, if you were to have the chain in a conventional position and have a high pivot, the bike will feel awful. It will just jack itself right up and just feel horrendous. To get around that, designers have put an idle wheel or an idler wheel at the pivot point basically and enable the chain to roll over the top of it. This effectively means because the chain is going over the pivot, it pedals like all the other bikes that have low pivots, but it has a suspension action of the high pivot. So it's another compromise. But not every bike manufacturer wants to design bikes like this because A, it's very hard to make the bike look good like this because you've got this extra position where the chain runs around, and also it has been said that you can feel some additional friction because you've got more chain going around another pulley essentially, so it's not always the best configuration. However, Norco, Common Style and Forbidden have done this absolutely brilliantly. And if you want to feel what it's like, I couldn't recommend trying it enough. Some people absolutely love this feeling, other people are not interested, but it's a good option for you out there. Okay, next question, and the last question this week is from Elliot P1. Doddy, I was just wondering, is it okay if you leave mud on your bike, say for a couple of days, and will it do damage? But it all depends how much mud. If your bike is completely coated in mud, then, well, yeah, because your mud's wet, you're going to get corrosion. So at the very least, if you can't be bothered to clean your bike or you're unable to clean your bike, at least clean down your transmission on there, even roughly, and put some sort of water displacer on there and some light lubricant, just to make sure that you don't get any corrosion on there. That's the most important thing. But the fact is, because you've got a number of moving parts on a bike, really, when your bike's muddy, you should be cleaning it. But that said, I've got a bike just hanging up there that's been ridden a couple of times and it is muddy, but the drivetrain on it's fairly clean, and I think that's completely acceptable. So it's down to you to basically to determine whether you need to clean it or not. Just make sure your transmission isn't likely to corrode or seize. That's all you're looking for. And that's the end of this week's Ask GMBN Tech. Hopefully you've given you some good answers to your questions. Any more? Get involved in those comments and we'll catch you on the next show. See you later.